Beyond the buzzer, inside the game, this is Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Midway through the week, and here we go. Sports IQ. Glad you're with us here. Great show coming up here. There are now only 3 undefeated teams in Division I basketball. We're going to talk with the insider from one of them here in a couple of minutes. Henry Oelhafen from Vandy. He is, we've spent a lot of time with him because obviously Vandy football had a breakthrough year. Well, basketball is doing it again. Who would think? Vanderbilt University. The pinnacle of men's college sports right now. But man, the Doors are doing it, and we're happy to walk right through and talk with him in a couple of minutes. Also, the things out at Auburn, not only football is up in the air as they're trying to rebuild under a new head coach, but also basketball too, the change after Bruce Pearl stepped down very quickly right before preseason began. So Peter Rauterkus joining us from AL.com as well a bit later on the show to talk about the Auburn Tigers and the portal and all things football there. So lots coming up. Well, also, I promised you last week that I would get into, almost 2 decades ago, I put together a what if, and I was at CNN Sports, a what if there was a 16-team playoff, okay? Now, again, this is 2006, 2007, so a long time ago. We'll get into what that would look like. I'll explain that here later on in the show. And we'll also talk about what's really going on right now. It's a big weekend coming up in terms of all the powers that be are meeting to determine what this is going to look like in 2026 and moving forward. So we'll get into those details as well. Lots to talk about here today on the Sports IQ with Larry Smith. Okay, let's get into it. Headlines. Of course, the big headline comes from Pittsburgh and the 9th coaching vacancy in the NFL this offseason. My goodness, the frequent flyer miles are going to be crazy. Mike Tomlin stepping down to 19 years and just an incredible run there in Pittsburgh. Never had a losing season in 19 years. We mentioned yesterday, though, 7 straight losses in the playoffs. That ties the all-time record, and so they're making a change now in Pittsburgh. How often do they change? Not very. Since 1968, Tomlin's successor will be only the 4th head coach of the Steelers since 1968. Chuck Noll was hired and at the end of the season then, began in 1969, went through 1991, Bill Cowher, 92 to 06, and Mike Tomlin, 2007 to 2025. So it's crazy. But again, as producer Tony pointed out yesterday, they got to figure out the quarterback thing. Kenny Pickett, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Aaron Rodgers, all since Ben Roethlisberger retired after the 2021 season. None of them could get it done. And so they got to find a way to get that guy who's going to solidify that position for them. A very key position there in the Steel City. So, but man, Mike Tomlin, not expected to coach next year. He's actually still under contract. So the Steelers can go out and get some compensation for him if he does go elsewhere. So watch and see. Obviously, he wins games, just doesn't win the big one. We'll see where he lands and if he does decide to continue coaching. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, interesting development. Star linebacker Fred Warner, he could return for the NFC title game next week. He has returned to practice, though they don't expect him to do much here this week, getting ready for the divisional round game against the Seahawks. But should they get past Seattle and host the NFC Championship game, they could have Warner in the lineup on the field. He has been out since he suffered a broken and dislocated ankle back in mid-October. So again, waiting to see that. NBA, meanwhile, Anthony Davis, no hand surgery, but gee, surprise, he's out for 6 weeks. Dallas Mavericks will be without their all-star big man. Again, this is Cooper Flagg's team anyway, so working to see how he can play without Anthony Davis as they continue to discuss some trade possibilities. NBA on the court last night, the Thunder beating the Spurs 119-98. Amazingly, it's their first win in 4 meetings already against San Antonio. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 34 points, as OKC gets its 34th win of the year, 34-7 now, 20-3 at home. Pretty crazy there, but what a great game on NBC, and to see SGA do his thing and the defending champs get the win over what's becoming a pretty good rivalry right there in the West. By the way, 7 games tonight. The best matchup is Cleveland at Philadelphia, and it's, in fact, the only matchup tonight of teams with winning records in the NBA. Okay, producer Tony has our first guest.
Well, thanks so much, Larry. And yeah, college basketball season, conference play really heating up. Things are getting very exciting in a lot of different conferences, especially down in the SEC. A little bit of a surprise. And one of the teams right up there at the top is Vanderbilt. Our friend Henry Oelhafen is joining us. He is the sports editor for the Vanderbilt Hustler. Henry, Happy New Year, sir. How are you? And welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back on. And exactly right. Happy New Year. Excited for what 2026 holds for all of us.
It's been quite the year. Let's just recap what the end of 2025 and the start of 2026 has held. Vanderbilt football had probably one of their best years in history. Now you're on the other end with basketball season, and they're picking up having one of the best starts in their history.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, to think 2 years ago, the athletic department for Vanderbilt, they were 9-23 in basketball and 10-2 in football. So you look at that turnaround in the last 2 years, it's really been incredible. And it's all testament to what, Candace Lee's done, our Vanderbilt's athletic director, head coach Clark Lee, head coach Mark Byington. It's just an incredible turnaround. And as you said, a fantastic end of 2025. Vanderbilt lost in the bowl game, but still an incredible season to reach that 10-win mark.
Wasn't there a time, and correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a time recently when Vanderbilt was thinking about how do we contract our athletics department and not spend quite so much money? And, they got a little brushback from some of their other conference members in that. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact sort of conversations that went down. That might have occurred a couple years ago, but I'm Vanderbilt's very bought into athletics now. I mean, I think even from the top down, Chancellor Daniel Diermeyer, who is obviously leading the university, is very invested in athletics, and athletic director Candace Lee is very invested as well. And I think they're fully bought into the revenue sharing from the new House settlement. They're fully bought into maximizing the NIL value for a lot of these players, and it certainly is benefiting them because obviously the turnaround's been very, very fun to watch and very, very exceptional. So I think all the coaches are very happy with where the athletic department is going and where they're trending in the right direction to fulfill all they want to do in the national landscape.
Well, and Vanderbilt really being in Nashville, which in the last 15 years has kind of exploded, in the national scene as far as Nashville being a hub city. People want to go there. People want to visit. Tourism is up. There's a lot of things booming in that Nashville area, and Vanderbilt is just an extension of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, Nashville's a fantastic city. I think that's a big pitch for a lot of recruits and transfer portal guys these days. It's just, Nashville's an incredible city. There's lots of NIL deals, lots of NIL value here in the city. But on top of that, you're going to have great crowds every weekend. The football stadium is sold out for just about every home football game this past fall. The basketball game attendance has been incredible so far in conference play. So it's really becoming a hub for Vanderbilt sports. And I think Nashville's starting to become sort of synonymous with Vanderbilt sports, which is just incredible to see. Obviously, there's a lot going on in Nashville. It's very different than, say, in Athens or Tuscaloosa, which really are revolving around the university in those places. But for Vanderbilt, it's really hard to sort of compete with the rest of Nashville. But I think it's slowly growing and slowly becoming more and more a part of the culture here on West End, which I think is an incredible impact to see. And obviously, the teams are certainly showing up for the fans as well.
Tell us a little bit about this 25-26 Vanderbilt basketball team. What has the coaching staff meant to this team at this point?
Yeah, I think it's really incredible what Mark Byington has done in his first 2 years. I mean, you look at a first-year head coach in the SEC, the expectation, honestly, is not to make the NCAA tournament. The SEC is a brutally hard conference, especially last year. Obviously, the SEC has taken a bit of a step down this year. I think everyone's in agreement that the SEC is not as strong as it was, I guess, a year ago. But to make the tournament in 2024-25 season was an incredible first step. And then you look at what Mark Byington did in the transfer portal. He brought an incredible transfer class, obviously that's led by Duke Miles, the Oklahoma transfer, who's now really popping off for Vanderbilt. But he brought in a lot of great guys, which have incredibly turned around this program once again. And now the Vanderbilt Commodores are sitting on that 1 or even 2 seed line for the NCAA tournament, according to a lot of bracketologists like Joe Lenardi and people like that. So I think the coaching staff, it's all credit to Mark Byington because he's been the one that's really been leading the charge and has developed this great program in West End.
Well, it's kind of you guys are almost mirroring what happened with Florida last year because Florida went out, new coach. I think it was his second or third year, Golden's second or third year there at Florida. He hit the transfer portal, brought in just the right pieces, combined that with what he had in place, and had the season of a lifetime basically last year. Vanderbilt seems to almost be following that kind of same model trajectory at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the model, yeah, exactly. It's very similar to what Florida did. And It's hard for me to say right now that Vanderbilt's going to win a national championship, but they're certainly on their way to a very high seed in March Madness. And if things continue like this in conference play, the ceiling really is even Elite Eight, Final Four. I have no idea how far they can go. I feel like Vanderbilt's a team that's always been doubted, even in football as well. They were picked number 11 to finish in the preseason SEC poll for basketball. Now they're arguably the best team in the conference. So they continue to prove the doubters wrong. They proved me wrong several times this year, and I'm excited to see what they'll do in the future because they've got a lot of incredible games coming up. They play Florida on Saturday, which is probably the top two teams in the SEC, arguably. I mean, Florida's had been an incredible run the last 3 games in the conference, so that's going to be an exciting one to watch. And I'm very excited to see how those two teams fare and how they battle in Memorial Gymnasium.
Yeah, that should be interesting, and it'll be a home game up there for Vandy up in their area. So definitely want to tune in and check that out. What has Miles brought to this team? You talk about the Oklahoma transfer. What has he brought? What is his game, and how is it parlayed into helping this team achieve this success at this point?
Yeah, I think it's really 2 guys on Vanderbilt's roster that you look at, you think, wow, they're legit. Like I think those are the players are Tyler Tanner and Duke Miles. Tanner being the primary ball handler, the primary point guard. He's been incredible this year. I've even seen him, rising a lot of draft boards. I think yesterday he was number 28 on ESPN's draft board to go to the Thunder. So obviously he's an undersized guard at 6 foot, but he's been incredible all year. He's an incredible defensive player, able to pick the buckets of a lot of opponents, able to get to the rim and make some plays around the rim as well. And then you combine him with Miles in the backcourt. It's really been incredible because Miles is the perfect versatile guard that Vanderbilt needs. He's able to play the 2 spot. He's able to play the 1 spot when Tanner's out. Is really your do-it-all guy, and you just know that he's going to drop double-digit points anytime he takes the floor in any given game. So he really has been the difference maker for this Vanderbilt roster so far. Really, those 2 guys, Tanner and Miles, have just blown me out of the water in terms of my expectations preseason. And I think they'll continue to be a force of a backcourt in the SEC as conference play certainly heats up.
Yeah, the conference season now getting right into the middle of its heart. We're about a week and a half past New Year's, so we're moving on right into the teeth of these conference schedules for the next 6 or 7 weeks. What are some of the toughest games coming up after Florida for Vanderbilt? They have any key road tests coming up that we should keep our eye out on?
Yeah, they'll obviously play Tennessee. They're always play them away and home. That's going to be a good game. I mean, there's always a lot of juice in that game with just it being a rivalry. And it's been a while since Vanderbilt's been probably this good in basketball, so that's going to add even more of an element to that game. I think Kentucky is obviously always a tough opponent. The Blue Mist always travels well, and we'll see if Vanderbilt can hang with the Mark Pope Kentucky Wildcats. But I mean, the conference schedule, it's brutal. I think, I said it earlier, I don't think the conference is as strong as it was last year. But then again, it's still the SEC, and it's still probably one of the top 2 or 3 conferences in the country. So, the schedule is never easy. There's going to be some really fun games. Arkansas is going to be really fun against Calipari. So I'm looking forward to the entire SEC slate. And I think it's unrealistic to say that Vanderbilt's going to go undefeated in conference play. I know a lot of projections on KenPom, the net. They obviously have them in favored in all their remaining games. But I think Vanderbilt stands a good shot at winning just about all of them.
Yeah, each night you have to take as one separate entity, right? You can't look ahead, can't say, okay, we need to start preparing for the conference tournament, or we need to start preparing for this. You've got to take one game at a time. Any of the big conferences, whether it's the Big Ten or the ACC or the SEC, every game is its own entity, and you can't overlook any opponent in any of those conferences and say, oh, okay, yeah, we're going to their place, but we're much better than they are. We'll just roll the basketballs out and win.
Absolutely not. I mean, the SEC, it's a gauntlet of a schedule. There's certainly going to be tested in the coming months as sort of conference play rolls on. I definitely expect Vanderbilt to see some in some very close games, which they haven't necessarily been in so far this season. I want to see how they really perform late. They had an overtime game against Memphis in the non-conference slate, but outside of that, they've been getting pretty comfortable wins, especially in SEC play. They beat Alabama, which is a big win last week, 96-90. Obviously, that was a big SEC win because Alabama is probably a top 4 team in the SEC right now. But I mean, they're certainly going to be tested, and I'm interested to see how Mark Byington's team really responds to those tests and see how they can move forward.
We know that, obviously with Miles, the other folks, they can score the ball. What has been the defensive transformation on this team that has kind of helped fuel this early season run?
Yeah, that's a great question because everyone always pays attention to the offense, right? It's really high paced, it's really explosive. Tanner and Miles run an extremely quick backcourt. So you look at all those things, and it's really hard, it's easy to point out how great the offense has been. But if you look on the defensive side, it's actually been, I'm not going to say as good as the offense because the offense is pretty exceptional, but it's been very, very solid. And I think you look at a lot of the advanced analytics on Ken Pom, the Net, Torvik, they all back up that Vanderbilt's a very strong defensive team. I think I looked yesterday morning, so my stats might be a little bit hazy since games were played last night. But that said, Vanderbilt ranked, I believe, number 11 in defensive efficiency in the entire country. So you look at that number, I mean, that's already pretty incredible. Tanner and Miles have been exceptional at forcing turnovers. Aiden Holloway, LeBaron Filan on Alabama's team, their backcourt, which is arguably one of the better in the country, they forced 8 turnovers on that pair against Alabama. So I think you look at that, Vanderbilt's very good. They rank very high in block percentage as well, able to create a lot of turnovers. And I think they're a very balanced team, in all honesty. I think the offense is obviously going to carry the storylines, but that defense, led by guys like Miles, led by guys like Tanner, led by guys like Jalen Washington, have been extremely impressive. And I think that defense could even take a step up in the coming months and really begin to match that offense. So when you have both things firing on both ends, really good things can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can lock down opponents, then that takes a little bit of pressure off the offense, right? If you know that you're going to get some stops, even if you miss a couple, you still can get, right back in there if you can make a couple baskets. Looking at the Florida game in particular, they've got some big boys there on the inside. How does Vanderbilt cope with that size of Florida for this upcoming game?
That's a fantastic question. I think that is the question in this game. Can Vanderbilt hang with just the physicality and size of Florida? Obviously, Vanderbilt's not the tallest team by any means. They often rely on Devin McLaughlin, who's 6'7", to even play in that 5 spot. So they did bring in a UNC transfer, Jalen Washington, who is 6'10". He's probably your biggest guy on your roster, but he's played probably limited minutes. He's kind of split minutes with McLaughlin at the 5 spot. So I think it's really Florida bigs, can they compete with Vanderbilt's bigs? Because I certainly see the Gators winning that matchup in terms of down low. So I think that's going to be one key one to watch out for. The Commodores have fared quite well considering their size. They've obviously are 3-0 in conference play. So I think it's going to be a matchup to watch, but I do think Vanderbilt will struggle with that matchup, and I do think Florida is going to have the advantage down low.
Yeah, that they are some big boys down in there, and they rotate so well, and they complement each other, even if they're on the court together, playing as a pairing, the way they pass the ball and shoot the ball and get inside for Florida. So if there's one thing that you want to look for in this game, if Vanderbilt fans are watching and listening to us right now, what's the one thing you want to see Vanderbilt do early so that they know that this game is going to be very competitive and we probably are going to come out on the right end of the score?
I think it's got to come down to the backcourt, and I think it's got to come down to shooting from beyond the arc, if I'm being honest. I think if you look at Vanderbilt's past games this entire season, they've shot the ball very well from 3. A lot of that is, Tanner, Miles, Nickel, they all are getting hot from 3. I think that's really important to just set that offensive rhythm. But I think it's also important that Vanderbilt, keeps away the turnovers, and I think it's important that Tanner and Miles get to their usual form, get into the basket, distributing that ball really well, because good things happen when Vanderbilt gets a lot of people involved in the offense. And I think if they can do those things well, they can definitely overcome their size deficit that they'll have to Florida. So I think that's going to be key. I'm interested to see how the bigs perform as well. I mean, that's always a question for Vanderbilt, and it's very Mark Byington, but you could see a lot of small ball lineups out there to try to run the Gators off the floor, but we'll see.
Yeah, if you can make them match up with you instead of you trying to match up with them, that obviously would be better for Vanderbilt, in the long run, I think. Well, Henry Oelhafen, thank you so much. We appreciate Henry Oelhafen being here, talking Vanderbilt, getting us ready for the big game Saturday between Vandy and Florida. He is a sports editor for the Vanderbilt Hustler. Henry, enjoy the game. We'll be calling you later in the season, I'm sure, as we catch up as it gets closer and closer to conference tournament time.
Thank you so much, Tony, for having me on the show again. It was great to be back.
We will take a quick time out here on the Sports IQ, but we will be back with more after this.
How would you like to get high-speed internet for your home for less than $2 a day? That's right. For about $50 a month, you'll get lightning fast internet. Are you paying less than $50 a month right now for your internet? Then call Whole Home Connect right now for blazing fast internet at $50 a month with no price increases, no hidden fees, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees. It's a great deal. And guess what? You can try it for 15 days. If you don't like it, you get your money back. But you're gonna love it, and you're gonna love the price. Internet for your home for $50 a month. That's less than $2 a day. Plus, no contracts, no upfront costs, no equipment fees, and our 15-day guarantee. Call now. 800-215-0341. 800-215-0341. 800-215-0341. That's 800-215-0341.
You're listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Appreciate Henry stopping by. Let's get to some WNBA news. We didn't get a chance to get to this earlier this week with all the guests that we had on. The WNBA and its players union agreeing to a moratorium after they could not come to a new agreement by Friday's deadline. Now, remember, to give you some background here, in case you're not following this, the collective bargaining agreement expired back on October 31st, but both sides agreed to extend it twice. Still no deal. And as producer Tony and I told you back last summer, look, we've been through this before. We have been through the wars with Major League Baseball, with NFL, with NBA, with NHL. We have seen it all. And we said back then, this thing probably is going to be prolonged. They're not going to settle this thing quickly. And here we are. They're not. 2.5 months after that CBA originally expired, they're still waiting to get a deal done. And by the way, if keeping score, we are now 3 months away from the draft. So again, things got to move pretty quickly here because so many things have to happen otherwise. We also told you back in August that most of the veterans, those with more than 2 years in the league, are free agents. As you know, everyone was anticipating a new salary cap and a new pay structure as a result of the new CBA. Well, in fact, ESPN is reporting that there are actually only 2 veterans who are not free agents. So when they do get this thing worked out and a deal is struck, you can guarantee there'll be unprecedented player movement. You will literally need a scorecard to figure out who is playing where, starting for whom, et cetera, et cetera. Watch this space because it's going to be crazy, and but it's also expected, and it's also necessary with all the money they have now coming into the league with expansion fees now reaching $250 million per, and all the new TV money that's unprecedented. This needs to be worked out, and so we wish both sides well in this. College basketball, meanwhile, big story off the court. Louisville, the former G League player London Johnson will not play this season for the Cardinals. He will redshirt instead. Head coach Pat Kelsey saying just too much ground to make up midseason here. Johnson, by the way, when he does play next season, presumably with Louisville, although it is NIL, transfer portal, who knows, he'll have 2 years eligibility remaining. So there you go. Louisville on the court, not doing so well at home at the KFC Yum Center, 79-70 losers. Number 20 Cardinals falling to number 16 Virginia. Hey, the Wahoos, Yahoos now, the Wahoos, I'm sorry, Yahoo, the Wahoos. We talk Yahoo Sports. The Wahoos are trying to get cute. 4-1 in the ACC right now, looking good. And finally, it took them a while to rebound after Tony Bennett's sudden retirement. But the Cavs looking good this year in the ACC. Iowa State climbing to number 2. We mentioned yesterday that it's they tie their best ever ranking. That was just last year. They hit number 2 last year and they lost. Hit number 2 this year and they lost. They got run out of the gym at the Fog by unranked Kansas, 84-63. Iowa State now 16-1, 3-1 in league play. Trey White 19-10 for the Kansas Jayhawks. Meanwhile, Nebraska goes to 17-0. Peyton Sandefur 28 points. Huskers just crushing Oregon at home 90-55. Folks, they're number 8 in the country. They are a veteran team. So I know people saying Nebraska. They're a veteran team. They're old. They're experienced. They have a very good coach in Fred Hoiberg, who always puts his best out there. They're for real. Okay, I heard someone yesterday say, "We haven't beaten anybody." Well, they beat a ranked Illinois team, currently 13th at their place, and they beat a ranked Michigan State team in Lincoln, also ranked. So, I mean, currently number 12. So, yeah, come on. Florida, meanwhile, looking outstanding. That opening loss in the SEC play to Missouri. They've now pulled off 3 straight wins, 96-8, 96-79 over Oklahoma. Florida now 3-1 in SEC play. Number 3, UConn beating 25th ranked Seton Hall. 7th ranked Houston over West Virginia. Number 12, Michigan State. Number 18, Alabama. 22nd ranked Clemson. And 24th ranked Tennessee. All winners last night as well. So again, 3 unbeatens left. 2 of them will play tonight. Number 1, Arizona at home against ASU. They're trying to go to 17-0. Also, number 10, Vandy, 16-0. They are at Texas in the SEC. 4th-ranked Michigan coming off their first loss of the season. They're on the road at Washington. Purdue, number 5 in the country, is at home against Iowa before they head out west as well. 6th-ranked Duke, by the way, has never played at Berkeley. But that all changes tonight as they take on Cal out west. The Golden Bears, by the way, 12-1 at home this season. Another funny story that we saw was just this is just sign of the times. To have a story that Nike signs an athlete to a deal. I mean, they've got a whole division for that, right? I mean, you know, they make billions because of that. Well, Nike has now signed its first pickleball athlete. Anna Lee Waters is 18 years old, and her deal with FILA expired in 2025. So the shoe deal thing, nothing new to her, even though she can just now be able to vote. Waters became pro. She turned pro at the age of 12. And makes an estimated $2 million per year. And now she'll make even more because she has signed with Nike. All right. Stay with us. Peter Rauterkus joins us next to talk a little Auburn football, Auburn basketball here on the Sports IQ.
You're locked in to Sports IQ with Larry Smith.
Let's talk more college football right now. We've been talking quite a bit about just the transfer portal and how nutty it is. I mean, you know, it's so unique. But anyway, let's get to that. Lots happening right now with the Auburn program. And joining us right now, once again on the show, Peter Rauterkus. He is the Auburn beat writer for AL.com. Peter, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so much going on right now. Let's start with the coaching change. How's the transition going with Hugh Freeze leaving and the new coach coming in?
I think it's been just like any transition that, like most of the ones we've seen in college football this offseason. You know, we've seen it's been a handful in the SEC. I think obviously the one that's gotten the most attention has been at LSU, Lane Kiffin. But, you know, Auburn, it's a big moment because really another chance for the program to reset. You know, this is a program that hasn't won more than 6 games since 2019. You know, you fire Gus Malzahn, you try to reset with Brian Harsin, that kind of blows up in your face. You try to reset again with Hugh Freeze, that kind of blows up in your face. So now, you know, Alex Willis is a very different type of hire than Hugh Freeze was. You know, it's a guy who's coming from the G5 ranks, is a younger guy, still seen as an up-and-comer, has SEC experience as a coordinator at Tennessee, and has already, you know, very different philosophies from what Hugh Freeze had. So, you know, I think obviously it's still in the transition phase, so they're still figuring a lot of things out and trying to build the roster. But, you know, I think it's going relatively well so far.
Well, he proved he could beat SEC teams. I mean, he put himself on the map back in September when South Florida, you know, went into Gainesville and beat the Gators, and they spent part of the year in the top 25. Now, I know that it's always, well, you know, who's the flavor of the month, but, you know, you have to restart somewhere. Hopefully, maybe this is the coach that can have some stability and build something here for the long term.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it with that beating Florida. USF had as many SEC wins last season as Auburn did. You know, so people, you know, so like that's something that gets brought up. People talk about who come from the G5 ranks. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I think after the 2.5 seasons that Hugh Freeze spent, you know, I think people just wanted something as different as possible. And just being around the program and being around Alex Goldsch a little bit, just being around the program, seeing how they do things, I think we're already seeing a lot of difference.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, Hugh Freeze had the, you know, kind of he, you know, rebuilt himself, if you will, or, you know, rebuilt his name, I guess, for the years at Liberty. But I think when he was hired, we all felt this was kind of a bit of a gamble, and it didn't come up well for the Tigers program. Speaking of in the SEC, so many changes going into 2026 in terms of coaches, Auburn, Florida, LSU, Ole Miss as well. It feels like there will be a different flavor coming up here this coming season because of all those changes.
Yeah, it's going to be very different. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Auburn plays all those teams. I mean, they play LSU, Florida's the SEC opener. They
Kentucky.
play Ole Miss. Yeah, they don't play Kentucky. That's the only one. They play Arkansas. That's the other one. But yeah, so it's a lot of different. And I think, you know, when you have a situation like this, I think you're going to see a lot of these teams and how they do compared this upcoming season. And I think Auburn is going to be in the mix of that. And I think, especially when you play a lot of those teams, you're going to be seeing that a lot. So, like I said, I think things already look different with how things are being done, but whether or not it'll be better, I think we won't really know that until, the ball kicked off in September.
Yeah, exactly. Talking to Peter Rauterkus again here. He's with AL.com, Auburn beat writer. Let's get to the transfer portal right now. And it feels like this is always a chaotic time of year for all teams. But I think especially if you have a coaching change, it's especially hard trying to navigate the switch and the regular things of life of a coach, of trying to, find a house, relocate your family, etc., and then get on board with all these guys out there, thousands of players looking for that you have to evaluate, looking for a new home.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's especially when you're coming in and bringing a new staff and everything's new. I mean, it would be tough for any coach, and especially when you got all this stuff going on, it's difficult. I think what's made that easier for Bosch and the staff is the number of players and staff members that he's brought from USF with him. I want to say it's up to 13 or 14 USF transfers that have already signed with Auburn since the portal began. He's brought a lot of staff with him. He brought the offensive coordinator, wide receivers coach, offensive line coach, cornerbacks coach, a few other support staff members. And, I think when you look at the players he's brought in, the one that stands out is Byron Brown, who's quarterback the past 3 seasons, all 3 of his seasons at USF, threw for 3,000 yards, rushed for 1,000 this past year, was one of the top available quarterbacks in the portal. He also brought pretty much the entire receiving core with him. And so for an offensive-minded coach and for a guy who brought his offensive coordinator and wants to keep that system the same, I think that's a big plus, especially in year one, if there's not as much of a transition phase. Now, you can ask the question, okay, will all of that production from the AAC translate to the SEC? And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But, it kind of takes away some of that learning curve that you might get otherwise.
Yeah, I think, and that's one thing, too, that we've saw, and it's kind of become the thing, right? I mean, we saw that with Gus Malzahn a couple of years ago with Indiana, bringing over a core of players from James Madison to help, transition that program. How you're covering a team right now that's a story, one of the story programs, national championship history. How has the Curt Cignetti factor affected Auburn or other SEC schools? Where we've talked for quite a bit now about, years ago, maybe you may get 4 years or 5 years to do a rebuild. That's not the case now. If you haven't done something in 3, even 2 years, you could find yourself out without a job.
I mean, I think that's the new model that everyone wants to follow. I think everyone is trying to be the next Indiana, find the next Curt Cignetti, have that kind of overnight rebuild. And I think sometimes that could be a little unfair because obviously they've done a great job, but I think expecting everybody to be able to do that in year one, I don't think that that's realistic. Is it possible? Sure. I think it's possible that it could happen at Auburn or it could happen at one of these other places that's hired a new coach, but making that the expectation, I think, is risky. People have talked about it with Auburn and Alex Golesh in South Florida, comparing it. There are some parallels. Obviously, Golesh comes from a successful G5 program at USF. I don't think USF was as successful as consistently as James Madison was when Curt Cignetti was coming from there to Indiana. But it's a team that had success this past season. Went 9-3, had some big wins, like you said, beat Florida. And he's brought a lot of those players with him. He's brought a lot of that staff with him. Now, is it going to turn out the same way? I think it would be unwise to put those kind of expectations on him and on Auburn in year one. But I think, like I said earlier, I think there's something to be said about having success somewhere and bringing that same foundation and that same formula with you. Now, like I said, talent-wise, is it going to work in the SEC? That's the big, we'll see. But, I think it is the method and the formula that a lot of places want to try.
Have you seen it change in terms of how the staff is put together? One thing we've heard, and with Indiana's success, we've talked with Indiana insiders quite a bit here in the past few weeks, is because they keep winning, and the story just keeps building. But one thing we've heard about Cignetti and his staff is the way that they do player analysis, and in terms of they've got a team that really just takes time, and they've hit home runs, if you will. Sorry for the bad analogy, because it's a wrong sport, but they've thrown touchdown passes on these other players, and they find the right players coming in that come in and do exactly what they want, the way they want it. Have you seen a change in the way staffs are being put together now, in regards to this new era of the transfer portal and NIL?
I think there you have some of that same vision at Auburn. I think that's a lot of places that have a similar vision to that. When looking at Alex Golesh's staff. I think it's a mixture of, guys that he was with at USF that he's familiar with that, follow the vision that he wants. And I think that vision is, a big thing they talked about is talk to people around the staff and the program is it's about the culture. They want people who will fit the culture. They talk about that the culture wasn't the best under Hugh Freeze, wasn't the best under Brian Harsin, and that's something that they want to improve in this next era. Obviously, culture is great, but you still have to have talent, and I think they recognize that too, which is why they've also brought in some people on the staff like Tim Banks, who was just got fired, was the defensive coordinator at Tennessee, brings a lot of SEC experience. Retaining DJ Durkin, who had been the defensive coordinator and was really successful. Same with Vontrell King-Williams, defensive line coach, had been there. So I think it's a mixture, and I think it's the same when you're looking at who they brought out of the portal. You bring a lot of these USF guys who, have played in the AAC, but are familiar with the system, are familiar with the culture. But, you still bring in a guy like Bryson Washington, the running back from Baylor, who was one of the top running backs in the portal. Because, and I'm not saying these USF players aren't talented, but you still need that proven production at a high level to get that mix. Indiana, obviously, look, when they started, bring a lot of James Madison guys, but as programs evolved, you've seen them invest more in bringing, these more star caliber and high caliber transfers who have proven at a higher level. I mean, just look at Fernando Mendoza. Obviously, he wasn't a Heisman winner when he got there, but this was still one of the top quarterbacks in the portal last season. So I think it's a mix. I think you need a little bit more proof of concept before you can start attracting those players too. And I don't think you have that yet at Auburn. But I think the hope is that, for the staff, bring in the right guys, fit the culture. Once you get that proof of concept, you can help you bring in some more of the top end guys.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question as well. And I've asked this with a few guests that we've had on. There's the other side of this entire equation, and that is the player. That this is, and I've said before, the way that the calendar is set up, you almost have to skirt the rules and talk to players and talk to coaches before the portal opens, because you've got 2 weeks again to completely upend your life, to get your papers released from a letter of intent from this school, to then begin talking to other schools, to go visit 2 or 3 schools, to make that decision, to apply, get accepted, enroll in classes, find a place to live and move, and then start classes. What is it like from the players' perspective? Are you hearing from them in terms of how stressful this time is for them?
Yeah, no, it can definitely be messy. I mean, it's one of those things from both a player and from a staff perspective. If it's January 2nd, the day the portal opens, and that's the first day that there has been any kind of contact between, if you're a school, you and an agent or someone close to a player, if you're a player, your agent, another school, and you are just trying to start your whole journey on January 2nd, you're going to be pretty far behind, So obviously, like, there's a lot being made about tampering, and yes, a coach cannot have discussions directly with a player before the portal opens. But obviously, there's intermediaries, there's agents, there's handlers, there's parents, there's whoever. So obviously that contact is happening beforehand. So yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think, what helps the players is that, and some of the staff members, especially if you're on a team like Auburn who didn't play in the postseason, is there is a month between your season ending and the portal opening. So you do have enough time to kind of get an idea of, all right, am I a player? Where am I going to be next year? Have I met with the current staff? Have we had our exit meetings? Have I decided whether or not I'm going to stay with this program? And I've decided not to. Has my agent or my parent or whoever, have they already started looking at, all right, where could I be going next? And so I think that's what the month of December has become. It's almost become like the legal tampering period. It's the time before free agency actually starts. And so that's almost more active than the portal, because the portal, a lot of cases, you see these guys who are signing within a day or two of the portal opening. These guys have probably already figured out where they're going before it opened.
Yeah. So many. In fact, if you've waited this long, what are you doing, right? I mean, in so many cases,
right,
a lot of guys don't have a home yet, and that's kind of part of the issue as well. I want to get a quick question, because a lot of turmoil there in terms of coaching turnover at Auburn basketball as well. Right before preseason camp starts, Bruce Pearl steps down, Stephen Pearl takes over, and it feels like it's been kind of a rocky start for Pearl Jr. there with the Tigers.
It's been up and down for sure. I mean, it's a lot of new, obviously the biggest being, the head coach changing, but, it's the same staff. So I don't think from a coaching perspective, things have changed that much. I mean, obviously Stephen Pearl's a guy who had been around that program for all 11 years that Bruce was there. So I think, I think he was the very obvious and natural choice for the position. And I think there's not a whole lot of drop off. I think the biggest thing is you're looking at pretty much a whole new roster. I mean, DeHaan Pettiford is your only returner from a team that was in the Final Four last season. There's obviously going to be a lot of change. There's going to be some adjustment when you have that. It's not as big of a team that it was last season. It's really probably not as talented of a team as it was last season. And so I think you're seeing that on the floor. It had a really good win this past Saturday against Arkansas, which was their first SEC win. So I think maybe that can springboard them and help them go into the rest of the season. But it's obviously a team that has flaws. I think defensively is where the weakest right now. And I think some of that is fixable, but some of it is just personnel issues that you can't really fix in season. So I think it's still a solid team. I think it's still a tournament team, but obviously nowhere near the team that was in the Final Four last season.
And obviously that's very lofty to hit that. You're right there, boots on the ground. You're there every day. Is there a story behind Bruce Pearl's sudden retirement that we haven't heard about, that we don't know about?
I mean, I think it's, it was pretty open when talking about it. Obviously the Senate seeking ready to open, that was something that he was, thinking about for a while, but he ended up, not taking that path. So now he just kind of gone into a ambassador role is what he has with Auburn. He's doing TV with TNT. I think for him, a lot of people criticize the timing, which I think is fair to an extent. I mean, it's the season was just getting ready to start, but I think this is something that he had been thinking about the whole offseason and even maybe a year or so before that his time, was coming. I think he always wanted to hand the program off to Stephen. That was always his plan. And I think he felt like that was the perfect time for him to do it. And I don't think there's too much more to the story than that, especially given that he chose not to run for the Senate during this cycle.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, we'll leave it there. Listen, Peter, Happy New Year. Always good to talk with you and get caught up on a lot of things happening. You've had a lot to report on here in these past 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it, man. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Peter Rauterkus joining us here once again. He is, again, the Auburn beat writer for AL.com. Always enjoy his insights here on the show. More Sports IQ coming up.
Fans of big sports radio and sports spectacular podcasts have a new home on the Chief Sports Network. Find your favorite programs and content all in one place by downloading the Chief Sports app in your mobile device. Created in South Carolina, the Chief Sports Network is the home of an expanding network of live and podcast format programming. It is also the home of one of the leading national college football podcasts, JC and Morgan, hosted by ESPN's Mike Morgan and 24/7 Sports' JC Sherbert. Download the Chief Sports app for free and find all of your favorite programming under one easy umbrella. Thanks to all of our markets for your loyal support of Big Sports Radio and our Sports Spectacular podcast, and we look forward to connecting with you anywhere in the world on the Chief Sports app.
Welcome back here. Thanks for Peter stopping by. Want to get to more. That's getting a look inside kind of what a team deals with, right, in this transfer portal era, what players deal with as well. We've talked about that quite a bit, and more conversations coming with some experts here later on this week. Meanwhile, let's get to the college football playoff. Obviously, the championship game is Monday night in Miami. Miami Hurricanes playing on their home stadium, just the way it worked out as they take on number 1 Indiana. And the favorite, I think, again, we mentioned the last we saw 8.5-point spread on that. But the issue is what happens moving forward. So, they had a deadline on December 1st to have a decision made regarding how this looks moving forward, starting in with the 2026 season. Will it still be a 12-team playoff? Will it go to 16 teams, 14 in the middle? It appears that everyone's kind of settling in on a 16-team, although the Big Ten still has a 24-team format they like to push out there. But it feels like right now it's going to wind up, it seems, that they can come to an agreement on the details. It'll be 16. So here's the deal. They have a meeting on Sunday. They'll meet on Monday as well to kind of talk about this, right? So SEC is saying a 16-team playoff. The Big Ten, again, 24. And again, these two are in control. So really, it's kind of what they decide to do and then present it to everyone else and see if they go along with it. And we'll go from there. If there's no agreement, if they can't come to terms, it will stay at 12 teams in 2026. The one change will be that the Power 4 champions will be in guaranteed. So under this, like Duke, that won the ACC in an upset, would be included under this format and they'd have just one team from the group of 5, which would have been James Madison. So, and then of course 7 at large after that. So, and the other thing too, Power 4 conferences are trying to work out how these conferences can rely on the CFP rankings in case of a tiebreak to avoid another ACC incident where you have a 5-way tie, I think it was, for the ACC, and somehow the tiebreak, Duke came out going into the title game to take on Virginia, and of course upset the Cavs from there. So, what effect will that have? What effect will this have on the bowls if you do take more teams out of the mix for a playoff? So, there's quite a bit there. Okay, last week and earlier in this hour, I talked about years ago. It was 2007, and I was standing outside the courthouse in Richmond, Virginia, about to go in to cover Michael Vick's sentencing, and ran into Dan Wetzel, who was a friend and was an up-and-coming sports writer, and again, still one of the best in the game right now. We were discussing a 16-team playoff, as we had done before, and realized we each kind of had come up with a similar version of kind of what this could look like. This is back before the playoff thing just didn't happen. I mean, you had just the one game in the BCS at the time. So my plan at the time, I'll throw it out to you now. Now, my thing was you put 10 conference champions in and then 6 at large. Now, we now know that there's a playoff that is never going to happen. So let's just modify that and say we go with 5 conference champions, as they're going to do now, the Power 4, and then the best from the group of 5, and then 11 at large. You would play the championship weekend on Thanksgiving weekend. That would be the final weekend of the regular season, as it were. Although, again, there is some talk about, as they're discussing this, if they do go to a 16 team, if the Big Ten can convince them eventually go to 24, there is talk about eliminating the conference championship games because, let's face it, they're meaningless. The 2 teams in the SEC title game, the 2 teams in the Big Ten, they're getting in. If you go to 16 teams and you do use the CFP as a tiebreaker in the other conferences, then both teams from the Big 12 and the ACC would both be in. So you really kind of take that out. The question is, how do you replace the revenue? Well, we all know, as we've seen the numbers, expand the playoffs. There's more inventory there. You still get the money. They have to work out there and how the money works out. Selection Sunday would be Thanksgiving Sunday. So imagine Thanksgiving weekend with all the big games. And then on that Sunday, you have the Selection Sunday. You play the first 2 rounds on campus in the first 2 weekends in December. Okay, which is kind of what they're talking about again. It's funny that Dan and I were way ahead of this game. You break for exams, and then the semifinals would be in New Year's Day bowls. You'd rotate them as we're doing now, and then the title game would come a week later. So in this case, it would be on Thursday the 1st, and your championship game on Friday the 9th. My scenario, this won't happen either. But back in the day, I said, hey, because at the time, 2007, bowl games had much more significance than what they do today. The losers of those opening rounds could still go play in bowl games somewhere. But again, that's not going to happen. So the way this would work, you go through, the top 10 teams because they were all in there already. Number 10, Miami, upsetting their way to the championship game. But the other 6 teams in this format, if this were in place right now, Notre Dame 11, BYU 12, number 13 is Texas. Vandy comes in at 14, and then JMU and Duke, the other 2 conference champions. So those matchups in round 1, which would be on the first weekend in December, number 16 Duke at number 1 Indiana, 15th seed JMU is at Ohio State. Vandy, number 14, takes on number 3 UGA. And here's the great matchup that I love that this would have happened. 13th ranked Texas would have been at number 4 Texas Tech. So here's what this would do. By the way, quarterfinals would then be on the 13th, a week later. Semifinals, again, as I mentioned, on January 1st. And then the title game would be on Friday the 9th. And here's what this would do. And I hope someone's listening because I've got it worked out for you. I worked it out for you literally 18 years ago. December 2007, I had this for you. If someone only would have listened. So, okay, here's the deal. Here's what this does. No buys. Obviously, buys are kryptonite because the teams with buys in the 2 years we've done this are 1-7. Only the juggernaut Indiana has figured out a way to avoid getting sleepy walking into its first game. You stay in routine. Teams were complaining about having weeks off and not playing, keeping the routine together. Football teams are very much on a schedule. Even if they have a bye week, there's a certain schedule they follow, a certain rhythm, a certain routine. And with this, you stay on routine. There are no weeks off for everybody, and then you come back later and play. With the exception of course, taking off time for the exam week and for the holiday break, but that's only 4 teams. You do that in bowl games anyway. All the games will be over before the start of the spring semester. We're complaining about the calendar, right? And that it's just how are you're opening the portal with all these teams still in the playoffs? What are you doing? Well, that's no longer the case because you really would have everything done before the spring semester, and fewer teams still alive with a transfer portal open. So again, it's still you can't quite. There's no way you can get around it because the spring semester is a spring semester, and this should be still about academics, right? But you still get this part done, and so I think again, anyone would have hit me, go ahead and at me. It's Sports IQ LS on YouTube, or on Spotify, or on Apple. I'll give this to you. It is right there. To me, it's very simple to figure this out. Anyway, there it was from 2007 to 2026, how college football playoffs should be run. All right, our moment of awe is next.
We all make more than 35,000 decisions a day. Most are small, but some can be life-changing.
When it comes to taking care of yourself, the most important choices can be hard to make. Like having a tough conversation instead of ignoring a buddy's call.
Or being there for support, not assuming things will just get better. Make the decision to be there for the veterans in your life, for your community, for yourself. Learn more at BeThereForVeterans.com.
Time now for a moment of awe. And, the LA Coliseum is a great cathedral of American sports. I mean, it's hosted Super Bowls, World Series, NASCAR, college football. Very soon, its third Olympics. But 75 years ago today, it also hosted the first ever Pro Bowl. Now, NFL All-Star games were nothing new. They'd had them before, but they went away with World War II. Well, the powers that be, the league decided to bring this back, sponsored by the Los Angeles newspapers. So again, media still very much involved, just like today with all of our sporting events. Every player had to get $500 plus expenses, but this was the first time the moniker Pro Bowl was used. 75 years ago today, the first one. And there you have it. Truly a moment of awe. Thanks again to our guests coming by, Henry Oelhafen, also Peter Rauterkus joining us as well. Great having those guys on. Henry, I always mess up Henry's name every time he comes in, and yet he's still friendly with a smile, still likes me. So thanks, Henry. You're the man. You're the man. Thanks to you as well. Make it a great Wednesday. It's a Sports IQ. And for Tony and Josh, I'm Larry. Make it a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to Sports IQ with Larry Smith, Monday through Friday. Continue the conversation at Sports IQ LS. We'll see you next time.